Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. Lordy, trying to figure out what the heck, WTH, is going on in the world is a very interesting investigation. I have another book to look at I've been reading. And it seems one of my commenters said, Rick, I think you've reached the bottom of the rabbit hole. You don't need to make videos any longer. You've figured it out. You don't even have to make videos for 2 hours. You can now make short videos. So I thought about it, and I'm reading this book, and it really does make me wonder, have I figured it out? Jews and the American soul. Statue or Liberty with the 7 candlestick holder. And of course, these days in the school systems and in our society, in the media, in the culture, during the holidays, Christmas and the cross and Easter seem to have evaporated. Somebody doesn't want it around. But apparently with the 7-stick candle holder, the menorah, even at the White House or on shopping store entrances on the glass recently, it looks like there's a switcheroo of a religion by certain people. Do I have to name who those people are? Jews and the American Soul, Advanced Uncorrected Reading Copy, Human Nature in the 20th Century. Andrew Heinze, Human Nature in the 20th Century, the 1900s. So before I read from this and have some commentary, I want to look at a couple other book covers. So who financed the State of Israel in the beginning? Who was behind it? Who was one of the sponsors with the Balfour Agreement? And also apparently connected with Theodore Herz, the initiator of the book called The State of Israel, the modern current Zionist and movement in the creation of the State of Israel after World War II. Baron James, not this particular one, but the Rothschilds. The rise and the fall of the French Rothschilds. Anka Mulstein. So they take all this activity and events as a complementary thing. Think about that. That was a Rothschilds. Tomorrow's weapons. Brigadier General J. 8th Rothschilds, USA retired. Nerve gases and germ warfare, the morality of toxic warfare, and its implications for peace. So you think this Rothschild's connected to the other Rothschilds and the Illuminati? Tomorrow's weapons, Brigadier General Rothschild. Here's their shield on the back of the first book. That tells us a lot. The unicorn, the lion, the bird on top of the crown. Quite interesting. The double-headed bird. That's the symbol on the Freemasons buildings in our cities, downtown. The arrows, the Maltese cross on the bottom, the other symbols there. I should probably spend a couple hours just looking up and explaining each one of these symbols. Jews an empire of their own. Hollywood. A lot of people know this. Neil Gabler, How the Jews Invented Hollywood. Do I need to say more? Did you watch yesterday's Monday night episode of Lucifer? Or maybe Thursday night's episode of Gotham? Bringing quality TV to America and the world. You think? Israel and the Bomb. Avon Cohn. Israel and the Bomb. Do they have nuclear weapons? How'd they get nuclear weapons? I've mentioned this in previous videos. The conspiracy, the spying, the manipulation, the control of America, so much more. Big, thick book. Freud, Jewish man, known for his theories of psychology. It's all about sex. Everything's about sex. Sex, sex, sex. And then look at our world right now. Transgenderism, homosexuality, pansexuality, and so much more. Gay marriage, rainbow coalition, destruction of Christianity. Freud, sex, sex, sex. His dream and sex theories, repressed desires, the stuff of dreams, the superego sexualized, personality, and all the other daring theories of the great Sigmund Freud, analyzed for you by the prominent American psychologist Joseph Jastrow. Another Jewish man, Karl Marx. I'm just pointing these out so when I start reading from Jews, the American Soul, and of course I've made many videos about other prominent people exposing the goings-on in the past couple thousand years involving the Jewish people. And apparently one of their cultural religious connections with the Kabbalah, mysticism, and many of them were accused of sorcery, witchcraft. They were magicians for kings and queens. So if you were into those things and mathematics, you were probably also, they would call you a doctor. So what's going on in our world? So let me read from this and throw in my 2 cents and see what you think. I believe this book here is supposed to be painting the Jews in a very positive picture. But is it a deception? And when I read it, think for yourself. I want to read from chapter 10. There's a picture of the author of a book we're going to talk about. There's his wife and an adopted daughter from the after World War II. So what does he have to say? What does this author have to say about him, what he had to say? A full-page ad for peace of mind. And I like the names of these titles of organizations and all that. Repeatedly, every time I look it up, these different names paint these things in beneficial light, but when you find out what they're doing, it's malevolent. But they give them nice names. A full-page ad for Peace of Mind in Life magazine, 1946. Pictured the book handed down from above by a male hand. So the cover of the book had the book being handed down by some hand from the sky, like it's a hand of God, giving it to we people. And God has a very prominent place in the Jewish religion, the Old Testament. But is it the same God, Jesus' Father, or Jesus, in the New Testament. And generally speaking, my opinion, and I'm not the most knowledgeable person on the Bible, but I think not, is the Jewish God the same God of the Christians? And of course, a lot of Jews embrace Christianity, so then it would be the same God. But the anti-Christians, the ones who had Jesus crucified, who's their God? Just curious questions that pop in my mind. And if I continue to do this research, maybe I'll figure it out, if it can be figured out. But that's why I read the books and have a conversation, so at least I can bat it around and see if I can sort it out. So this author talks about this other author of a book called Peace of Mind. So that lit up my light bulbs right there. If you call the book Peace of Mind, is it really? 1946, that would be immediately after World War II, and the annexation of Palestine, creating of the state of Israel. A lot of big things happened after World War II. That's why they had World War II. A lot of things happened during and after World War I. That's why they had World War I. As Albert Pike, the leader of the Freemasons for the southern jurisdiction of the United States, also a general in the war between the North and the South. He was a general for the South. And on his book has the eagle with the two heads, like we saw on the shield of the Rothschilds, and like we see on the Freemasonic lodges in all our city squares. The connections. Life readers may have wondered if the hand was supposed to be the author's, the publisher's, or the Lord's. But in any case, it would have been Jewish insofar as the author was a rabbi, the publisher was Simon and Schuster, and the God in question was the God of Moses rather than Jesus. So it says right here, the God of Moses rather than Jesus. Where my finger is. So it's not me here trying to say bad things about anybody. That's what the book says here. The God in question was the God of Moses rather than the God of Jesus. And if we remember me reading the material about the King Solomon's temple, there goes my phone. Anyways, talking about why they built King Solomon's temple. It was to have a house or a holy place for the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant was created because when Moses was up on the mountaintop 3,000 years ago, plus or minus, talking to the burning bush or the glowing light, this God gave him instructions on how to build this box, like 2.5 feet by 3.5 feet by 2.5 feet, lined with gold with a cover on it and 2 cherubim. So I guess it could house this spiritual being called God, and it could even levitate itself, according to the material I did in a previous video, and attack the enemy. If you opened it like in an Indiana Jones movie, sparks or lightning would come out and it would start murdering and killing everybody. So, pardon me, but I have a hard time believing that's God. The God of Jesus. The God that created everything. But what do I know? I'm learning here as I go along. So Joshua Liebman had written an emphatically, got to get warmed up with my reading, Jewish book, the first of its kind to enter an inspirational mass market long monopolized by Protestants. So I've learned a little bit about Protestants. I've been talking about that. The anti-Catholics, who apparently had a hand in with their revolutionary activities with Jewish people at that time. By appealing to Americans on the basis of psychology rather than theology. So these would be a Jewish author appealing to Americans by using psychology. And of course we have Freud, Jewish, telling us everything is sex, sex, sex. And that seems to be a predominant issue in the history of some of the goings on with the Jewish people. Liebman could compete with his Christian peers because he was basing it on psychology rather than theology. And I think Liebman was a big fan and follower of Freud, another Jewish psychologist, who gives us that all of us are suppressing our sexual desires, which is causing all the problems. So you just got to let loose. Be gay. Be pansexual. Pedophilia. Transgender. And so much more. There's something more going on than most people want to really admit. Showing homosexual movies to kids in grade school, even trying to pass laws to lower the age of consent. And I'm not trying to be a prude and say I don't like modern things or I think sex is bad, but I'm trying to find out what the heck is going on with the New Age, New World Order, and globalism, which seems to involve this religion they have. That's pretty clear to see, if you're awake at all. Theology favored believers over non-believers, whereas psychology placed everyone, Christian as well as Jew, on the same ground and recommended its prescriptions for maturity to one and all. And I'm not even going to say that this author might have been intentionally malevolent, trying to deceive us. It was 1946. But then again, I don't know. I'll read on and maybe we can figure it out. In his book, Peace of Mind, Joshua Liebman said that spiritual growth depended on the psychological maturity, but he also said something else that gave his book a polemic thrust. So I did look up the word polemic. Polemic is an aggressive attack and a refutation of opinions of others. So his book gave us a polemic mythic thrust. Aggressive attack. Refutation of opinions of others. I thought that was interesting to look that up. Judaism, Liebman preached. So Judaism, the Jews have had problems with the rest of the world for 2,000 to 3,000 years, exiled from Rome and Spain and Britain and France and plus or minus 100 countries since then. Even in the Tennessee territories of the United States during the Civil War by General Ulysses Grant. I went over that and read that in the Encyclopedia Judaica published in Israel. Judaism, Liebman preached, Liebman, offered a unique healing message of self-acceptance, and self-acceptance formed the foundation for neighborly love. Behind the consolations of that peace of mind offered its readers, the book transmitted a modern Jewish theology into American thought about human nature and the human condition. And like I always say when you read a book, just because you're reading it, don't go, "Wow, that's interesting," and believe it. A lot of material is a deception. You have to use discernment. Takes a little thinking. Why historians forgot about peace of mind. Joshua Liebman was part of a post-war religious revival that also made celebrities of Norman Vincent Peale, Billy Graham, Fulton Sheen. New churches and synagogues sprouted like mushrooms on the suburban landscape. And of course, they were bashing the Germans for what they called the Holocaust, 6 million Germans killed, burnt in ovens, they claim. But they seem to forget to mention prior to World War II, there was ads in newspapers claiming that 6 million Jews were in danger of being annihilated prior to the war. And prior to the war, another book was published by the Jews. It's a Jewish businessman in New York. You can go watch my series. Series 124, Germany Must Perish. And it called for the annihilation of every human being who was German DNA. Men, women, and child. The book clearly calls out, go watch my video, look it up for yourself. For that particular lineage of DNA, the Germans needed to be eliminated from the face of the earth prior to World War II. World War I had nothing to do with the Jews. It was between Britain and Germany was winning, and the Jews have been pursuing the Zionist movement, regaining their kingdom in the Holy Land, the Middle East. Hundreds of years of activity. And when Britain was losing the war, some elite Jewish people had a brainstorm and had created something called the Balfour Agreement with Lord Balfour, that if the Jews could use all their muscle, their money, and their controlled President Woodrow Wilson and get America into the war on the Britain side, then the Brits would help them afterwards obtain the Middle East, the Holy Land, for their new kingdom. But before World War I, the Jews had found safe haven, a utopia, a Garden of Eden in Germany, after fleeing Russia. And then after World War I was the Bolshevik Jewish Revolution, they call it. It was basically an invasion of Russia by the forces that won World War I. We the people aren't told the story this way. And then, of course, that went on for 10 or 15 years in Russia after World War I. And 25 million to 100 million Christians and other good people, Russians, were killed by the Bolshevik Jews who were controlling Russia. 25 million, admitted in an Israeli major newspaper. You can look this up. And some historians and researchers estimate it was 100 million. And then they talk about World War II with 6 million. What something seems to be a disparity there. 25 million or 100 million in the Russian Revolution, the betrayal of Germany during World War I, and then the 6 million in World War II. But before that, elite Jewish people published the book and others, and passing it around, that every German citizen must perish, men, women, and children, from the face of the earth. And now there's a lot of bashing towards white people and continually trying to change our society by multicultural immigration and sex. They want to get rid of our uniqueness. But on the other hand, they want to keep Israel just Jewish and be unique. So I think about those things when I'm reading this, using discernment, what this gentleman says, and the time frame when the book was written. So synagogues were sprouting like mushrooms in this suburban landscape. By 1953, 60% of Americans belonged to congregations, an all-time high. As for the other 40%, roughly 64 million people, a popular guide to religions of America, including them too, on the simple grounds that most of the millions who did not go to church are religious. So back in the 1953, that period after World War II, generally speaking, most of us Americans believed in God. But a lot has happened since then. A lot of propaganda, a lot of New Age material, a lot of smoking of marijuana. I'm not trying to bash that. A lot of drinking of wine and alcohol promoted. A lot of heroin and other drugs, even imported by the intelligence agencies. A lot of books about that. And the elites controlling our world and governments so they could obtain huge amounts of money, plus change our society. It took a while. Unfortunately, our understanding of the revival that Liebman, Peel, Schein, and Graham represented has been badly damaged by the resilient stereotype according to which post-war Americans sought a shallow, positive thinking, feel-good religion to go along with the luxuries that inspired economist John Kenneth Galbraith to dub American the affluent society. So this book here that I'm reading was published, copyrighted, looks like 2004. Critics claimed that the rejuvenation of religious life was more apparent than real, more a function of suburban social needs than of theological or spiritual demands. The motto of the era, one that had been parodied since the day of it was uttered, was President Eisenhower's statement that American society had to be based on a deeply felt religious faith. And he said, and I don't care which one it is. Eisenhower alluded to a growing public feeling that Protestants, Catholics, and Jews shared a common sense of religious values transcending dogmatic differences. That is why it did not matter which faith American accepted, as long as they accepted one. I disagree with that. The most influential critique of American religion to come out of that era was Will Haberg's Protestant Catholic Jew, 1955. Decried the faith for the sake of faith. Faith for the sake of faith. Attitude that seemed to prevail after the war. Herberg perceived the cult of faith as a sign of the disintegration and the enfeeblement of the historic religions. So they were trying to promote the disintegration and the enfeeblement of the historic religions after World War II. And a lot went on during the hippie age. Over in Europe, they called it festivals. And even during the Vietnam War, where they were actively mind controlling and changing our society, as a lot of people know. Even with the introduction of drugs and bringing the troops back from Vietnam and the helter-skelter activities going on, Woodstock and so much more. I grew up in that era and I was sucked into it too. But then later on we look at those album covers and we see the pyramids and the eyes and the rainbows, and some of the records when you play them backwards or have evil words. What's going on? Familiar words are retained, but the old meaning is voided. Phrases such as have faith or don't lose faith had once been injunctuous to preserve one's unwavering trust in God. But in the post-war era, they had degenerated into an appeal to maintain a positive attitude of life and not to lose confidence in oneself and one's activities. To believe in yourself and in everything you do, such at bottom, is the meaning of the contemporary cult of faith, whether it is proclaimed by devout men from distinguished pulpits or offered as a secret of success by these self-styled psychologists. Some days I just read better or not. Protestant Catholic Jew portrayed the new consensus forming in America as Catholics and Jews entered what had once been a Protestant mainstream. And also I am reminded that when Francis was elected to be Pope of the Christian Church, Catholic Church, and then he made a video to all the religious leaders of the world, you can go look it up, that it's time for us to unite because there's no reason for us to be separate anymore. And of course on the bumpers of some cars you'll see a whole string of different kinds of symbols that says coexist and other things. So somebody's trying to intentionally mesh all this into one pot. But why? And can you mesh the evil forces with the good forces? Is that what they're trying to do? And from my understanding, that is a part of the mystery religion. They believe there is no evil or good or bad, that it's all a matter of human experience. And if you feel it, well, you should do it. Who's to deprive us from our enjoyments, whatever they may be? Are the pedophilias really evil people? The bestiality, people who want to have sex with a dog or a cow, are they really bad? This is what they would have us think. Homosexuality, pansexuality, transgenderism, even the cartoons declaring to children, sitting in their living rooms with the parents not watching. Little Sally Bear says to Mary Bear, you can go out with a boy or a girl, whatever you want. You can date a boy this weekend, you can date a girl next weekend. Little cartoons. 6, 7, 8-year-olds are sitting there in the living room all watching it, glued to the TV. And so much more. You only need to go on YouTube and look up some of the stuff on videos. Satanic scenes and cartoons. Just plug that in. Anything like that. Get a little creative. And you'll get a mountain of material. Even in the movies. But a lot of people are aware of this. Hunger Games movies. Divergent. The Lucifer program. Gotham. And it's just... some of it, Brokeback Mountain, I could go on and on. TV programming, Modern Family. They are doing it intentionally. That's part of what you can read out of what I'm reading here about how far back this goes and the intention. the thick walls traditionally separating these three faiths had begun to thin. So the thick wall that they were trying to tear down since the 1920s, when the communists testified before Congress, they had infiltrated the Catholic Church and the education system and everything, the arts, museums, theater, radio, the media, and they were going to tear down those walls. Americans began speaking of their society as a Judeo-Christian civilization. So that's what they want us all to believe. I think it's a huge deception. Try to immigrate over to Israel. If you're not Jewish, you're not even pure Jewish, you can't. But they expect people all over the world to integrate. And I think I'll play a clip from a video right now, just to show you what I mean.
Deputy Prime Minister Eli Yishai demanded their expulsion.
אם ייתנו לי את כל הכלים, ואני פועל להשיג את כל הכלים, וזה לא קל. אם ייתנו לי את כל הכלים בלי יוצא מן הכלל, תוך פחות משנה לא יישאר בארץ ישראל אפילו מסתנן אחד.
יש להם שם בית. מה זה גירוש? איזה גירוש? הם שווים הביתה. כל מדינה בעולם מתוקנת הייתה עושה את זה. נהפוך להיות מדינת הגירה, אבל יש כאלה שעוינים את המדינה. ולכן הם רוצים להפוך אותה למדינת אזרחי כל העולם. נביא לפה 1,000,000 אפריקאים, 500,000 פיליפינים, 2-3 מיליון סינים, ושלום על ישראל.
למה זה מאיים שיהיו פה 1,000,000 אפריקאים?
זה מאיים כי לא תהיה פה מדינה יהודית. המדינה שלנו, תקשיב, המדינה שלנו שונה ממדינות אחרות. המדינה שלנו היא מדינה יהודית ודמוקרטית.
There's plenty of evidence out there, if you pay attention at all, that they do want the rest of the world to be multicultural. Evidence out there about 911 and even Jewish agents, Mossad, behind that. I've made videos on books that showed all the evidence. Webster Tarpley's 911 Synthetic Terror. And there are many others, and I will continue to research that. And even with the Balfour Agreement, the deal made during World War I, when Britain was losing the war, so they could annex the Palestinians' lands. But they want to keep Israel a pure Jewish state, as you just saw, and you can verify that. There are plenty of books, and what I read here. But they want the rest of the world to be multicultural, and even if they have to force it. Listen to what this Frenchman says on this video clip.
Ça va faire parler. Mais l'objectif, c'est relever le défi du métissage. Ce n'est pas un choix. C'est une obligation. Si ce volontarisme républicain ne fonctionnait pas, il faudra alors que la République passe à des méthodes plus contraignantes encore. Nous devons changer. Alors nous allons changer.
Hardly anyone imagined just 20 years ago that the native French population would be finding itself in a rapidly decreasing minority here.
And it gets crazier. Look at this German leader. Watch this clip.
An Sie, dass der Islam, so wie der Bundespräsident Wulff es gesagt hat, zu uns in Deutschland inzwischen gehört.
Sie werden nicht vertreten. Er kann jederzeit das Land verlassen, wenn er nicht einverstanden ist. Das ist die Freiheit eines jeden Deutschen.
Wir müssen uns gegen die Nazis stellen. Schon aufgrund unserer Geschichte zwischen 1933 und 1945 sind wir verpflichtet, Flüchtlinge anständig zu behandeln. Dann gibt es ja noch was. Jedes Jahr sterben mehr Deutsche als geboren werden. Das liegt zum Glück daran, dass die Nazis sich auch nicht besonders vervielfältigen. Und schon deshalb sind wir auf Zuwanderer aus anderen Ländern angewiesen.
To me, whiteness is an identity that arises entirely out of oppression. Whiteness is not a culture, it's not a religion, it's not a language, it's simply an oppressive social category. Blackness is an identity that can be plausibly argued.
We have exterminate white people off of the face of the planet to solve this problem.
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point, in time. Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural, and I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make.
Jews are going to be...
And I'm aware you can show all the evidence in the world. People can go outside and see the planes dumping chemicals. You can watch all the videos. You can show your friends. But so many people want to stay in denial. People don't want to look into the fact that they're weaponizing microwaves and the wireless and other technologies. And they change even TV to the digital, where it has other capabilities, technologies, mind control abilities, including the drugs and the training for school children. There's a lot going on. They want to have the world multicultural, destroy the world as we know it with any kind of unique patriotic groups that might have free thinking and ideas of their own, and refuse to assimilate. But yet, on the other hand, as that one Jewish leader said, Israel is different. It is a Jewish state. And look at all the other book reviews I've made on the books I've read, and the ones I will make, continuing this conversation. And the evidence is mounting. Then maybe I have come to the bottom of the rabbit hole. So back to this book. So they're trying to bring us something called a Judeo-Christian civilization. And of course with 9/11 they've virtually really destroyed most of them, not all the nations over there. North Africa and the Holy Land, the Middle East. And even to punish, so they say, Russia. They overthrew or had him overthrown, the Ukrainian president. And according to King reporting, another video I watched, within days they airlifted 35 tons of gold out of the Ukraine. There's a lot more going on. Even with 9/11, apparently a lot of gold was in the bottom of one of those buildings, and evidence of a huge heist. There's lots of evidence to all these things, but apparently nobody wants to get a handle on it, or come to grips with it, or think about it. They think that they just ignore it, it's going to go away. But the reality is it's changing to where they've accomplished their goals, even with President Donald Trump announcing that the United States recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And that is no small thing. That's what 9/11 was all about. World War I, World War II, and much more. Considering that Jews constituted less than 4% of the U.S. population, the replacement of Christian by Judeo-Christian stood as a remarkable symbolic milestone. The very title of Hamburg's book promoted his own people to a parity, an equal among three partners, that they would not have gained on the basis of ethnicity, the ethnics, where Jews coexisted with scores of other minorities. Norman Vincent Peale, Fulton Sheen, Joshua Liebman personified the new religious pluralism in which highly literate, non-parochial Protestants, Catholics, and Jewish preachers all addressed an ecumenical mass audience. But Heiberg brooded over the theological cost of the new arrangement. He believed that the ecumenical melting pot destroyed the integrity of each religion. The triumph of Peale, Sheen, and Liebman Liebman meant the victory of blandness and conformity and the deterioration of the authentic Protestant Catholicism and Judaism. Herberg's analysis was so trenchant and struck such a chord that it became the standard interpretation of post-war religion and of peace of mind for a full half century, 50 years. Herberg, however, grossly misrepresented peace of mind as a new kind of faith healing, a doctrine of, if I believe, my troubles will disappear. And of course, they want a lot of people just to think, hey, just think positive. Don't listen to the negatives. You hear that from everybody. It's because it's been bombarded out there, taught to people. They don't want people to see the truth, what's going on, the plans for the future. Even books I've gone over on depopulating the planet. Look at my videos on that. It's hard for me to remember the series numbers. So I'll just look at a couple books here for a moment. You can look this up online, Report from Iron Mountain. I made a video or two on it. Series 28. Disarmament and the Economy, Disarmament Scenarios, War and Peace as Social Systems, The Function of War. Substitutes for the function of war, summary and conclusions, recommendations. So the elites were gathered together, some of them chosen by some secret society members who control the planet, and had to come up with some substitutes for wars to keep the people united. Guess what some of those were? Threat of a nuclear world war, threat of an economic collapse, threat of weather changes, and all the other fears that we're experiencing. They had these plans so that they could control us. Meanwhile, they were publishing books, The Limits to Growth, by the Club of Rome, another secret society. You can see where my hand is. Series 27. Watch my videos and see for yourself. The other one was Series 28. Report from Iron Mountain. And I think you can find Report from Iron Mountain on the internet, PDF free. And then, of course, another book, The Population Bomb. You see what I'm saying? This stuff was real in the 60s and 70s. And they still believe it. There's a plan, like the report of Iron Mountain says, or the Protocols of Zion, or the book The Jewish Utopia. Series number 8 and 67. Go watch those two. The Protocols of Zion, right up here was PDF form, and the Jewish Utopia, right here where my finger is, this long book, is the Jewish Utopia, Series 67. And the population bomb. So back in the 60s, they were concerned and they were trying to get a hold of control of the world and reduce the population. They're trying to bring about this new paradigm shift, this new world order, new age, and globalism, and they want a redesigned human race. And then, of course, I have all this material behind me up here in my memory bank when I'm reading a book like this. And I see a picture like this. That's the part you call discernment. You have to read it sentence by sentence and put two and two together. And knowing that the author who wrote the book there was 1946, and this was a 2004 year author who wrote this book. So somebody obvious by this picture, and obvious during Christmas time where the 7 candlesticks symbol is everywhere, and the cross and Jesus is disappearing, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes or a genius to figure this out. So anyways, so they were trying to get people to believe that if I believe, my troubles will disappear. And of course we all know they want people to don't listen to people who talk about negative things, and all the information from the channeled material on the internet by these psychics talking to some beings from the other side who's saying that all you have to do is think positive and think of something really hard and it will manifest and you can have all the wealth and sex you want. Meanwhile, school shootings, bombings, politicians being pushed to create more gun laws, crazy things going on in the world. The government seems to be pushing relentlessly to bring online this 5G microwave weaponized system with the AI, artificial intelligence. It's all coming about. The beast system. So back to the book. He conveniently ignored Liebman's emphasis on the hard work and patience required to gain insight into one's own psyche. With the stroke of a gifted pen, Herborg established a caricature of Joshua Liebman that lasted 50 years. Historians of America in the 1940s, if they mention peace of mind at all, do so with condensation, noting that the book initiated a spat of Renaissance tracts and claiming that the religious awakening of the 1940s had another more rigorous side rooted in theology. Well, they're trying to eliminate Christianity and family values and gain some kind of forced acceptance on this new world they're trying to bring us. And this is not the first time throughout history. I've got other books on this. Even histories of American Jews in the post-war era saddle Liebman with this stereotype, linking his pop religious psychology. We all know what pop music is, and the hip-hop and all that. The pop religious psychology with simplistic guides to instant Judaism. Moving on. A few discerning scholars of American religion have not fallen into Herborg's trap. They recognize that Peace of Mind was not a positive thinking treatise, but their influence has been limited. As late as 1995, the prestigious Jewish journal Commentary published an article on the post-war religious revival that discussed Pearl, Sheen, and Graham, but made no mention of Liebman and hastily concluded that the revival was Christian. Because of the general disregard of Peace of Mind, the Jewish features of the book have been largely overlooked, and virtually no one has noticed that the Jewish polemic lying between its covers. Remember, I looked up polem, that word, Polemic, polemic, and it means aggressive attack, refutations of opinions of the author. So they're saying the aggressive attack lying in between the covers of this popular book back then for 50 years. But once we look at Liebman's arguments, we are forced to reevaluate the entire world of post-war American religious thought, which contained more conflict and less conformity than we have been led to believe. A new Freudian Musa, it's another title here, Milton Steinberg 1903 to 50, a peer of Liebman, who was one of the most gifted American rabbis of his generation. You see with this book here, it's painting all the Jews and the things they do in a very positive light, trying to create some kind of homogenization of all the religions, part of back then preparing for this new age, new world order globalism. But it's not for Israel and these elitists who control our world. It's for the rest of us, as the movies like Hunger Games and Divergent already show us, and other TV programs like Modern Family. But as me, as a Christian and a God-fearing person, it doesn't take a lot of brains and common sense to realize that pansexuality, that means sex with anything and everybody and anything and anywhere, anyhow, is just a little bit naughty, to put it in silly terms. That's not the kind of world, I don't know, if I was an astronaut in the future going to other planets, would I want to come upon this planet that was one gigantic orgy? It'd be kind of weird. Or would I like some kind of just advanced civilized society? I guess we all have a choice to make. Declared that peace of mind stood as an indisputably Jewish contribution to the spiritual resource of the American community. Now remember what I'm reading here. This is the Jews, the soul of America, why I'm reading this. People read these books. But do they use discernment? And who's it trying to mislead or deceive? Steinberg was in a position to know. He wrote his own minor classic, Basic Judaism, 1947, a lucid exposition for the general reader that remained in print for the rest of the century, a durable historical novel. As a Driven Leaf, 1939. So I guess that was the name of the book, As a Driven Leaf, about the heretic of antiquity, Elisha ben Abula, who was torn, like most of Steinberg's 20th century readers, between Jewish and worldly values. The rabbi of the Park Avenue Synagogue in New York City, Steinberg, belonged to the conservative movement of American Judaism, which was much more traditional-minded than Liebman's Reforms movement. And I do realize that reading this kind of material may just be a little mind-boggling to people to go, Rick, why are you reading this? Well, in the next 2 pages, I highlighted a lot of things. So sometimes you just have to read some of the boring stuff to get to the good stuff, to try to get into the psychology of what these people think. They're getting into our psychology to what we think. He had little appetite for trendy, mass-marketed books with sparse Jewish content. In his review of Peace of Mind, Steinberg made a point of praising Liebman for refusing to water down his Jewish background and Jewish sources in order to appeal to a wider public. But what made Steinberg's assessment of Peace of Mind particularly astute was his ability to see that the book occupied a special place between two genres, the American inspirational books, which there were plenty published back then, and Musar, Jewish ethical books. Though criticizing Liebman for putting religion on a psychological straitjacket, Steinberg recognized that Peace of Mind was much more sophisticated than the typical inspirational bestseller. He placed peace of mind into the tradition of Jewish ethical writing that included, at its best, such work as Lezuto's Path of the Upright. Of course, Steinberg realized that a Musa book, that would be Jewish ethical book, written for a large interfaith audience would look a lot different from those written over the centuries for strictly traditional Jews. But he saw one overriding criteria that qualified peace of mind as a classic inspiration: the capacity to synthesize theology with the dominant intellectual trends of the age. And here we go. As in other ages, Steinberg wrote, the core challenge to the human spirit took the shape of the harmonization of religion and science. So today, one of the most urgent ideological tasks is the establishment of a rapport between faith and its practical implications on the one hand, and psychiatric techniques and their presuppositions on the other. Rabbi Liebman, in other words, had undertaken an assessment at the very center of the thought life of our age. Among the connections Liebman made between tradition and modern monetary, some of these words, he linked rabbinic and Freudian conceptions to human nature. So he's linking rabbinic and Freudian conceptions to human nature. So they're trying to put how they think that we operate into the same basket that Jewish Freud does, that everything is about sex. And apparently, throughout history, there has been this separate group of people who were more, I guess, into things, how do I say it, like a drunken orgy, more promiscuous or even naughty and nasty than other people's around them. And it caused some people some serious problems. Even in Germany, they were always scolding the Jewish people, some of them from Eastern Europe, that this was wrong or that was wrong, and it created a lot of resentment. So apparently the goal here is if you can't beat them, you may as well join them. So they want the rest of us to be a more of a drunken, orgy, chaos, anarchy society. I know it's hard to see that reading between the lines, but I'll continue. And I have a lot behind me here in my brain that I've read that I'm kind of trying to put a handle on and describe exactly what they're trying to do. It is definitely an anti-Christ activity, which is anti-family value, anti-social. And I'm not confident at all that this new world they want to bring us would be a betterment for humanity. Lieberman linked the Freudian idea of inescapable psychic conflict to the old Musa idea of Yitzhak. Actually, in Judaism, there is a very realistic understanding of human nature as a battleground between the good impulse and the evil impulse. You see what I'm saying? So they're thinking this new religion is if I have a good impulse, it's good. Do it. But if I have a evil impulse, do it. That's good. Because if you have an impulse as a spiritual being in this biological body, Not that these people believe in God. They don't believe in doing things for the spiritual world. From my understanding, is they believe in the here for now. Do it for the flesh world, the material world, to get all you can, to live as large as you can, to get as much money. And nothing should stop you if you have evil inclinations, perverted even. Want millions, trillions, or to kill somebody. So it says here, actually in Judaism, there is a very realistic understanding of the human nature as a battleground. So they're lumping us all into this. And this battle's been going on a long time. Would it explain why for 2,000 to 3,000 years the Jews have been on a diaspora, apparently dispersed throughout the world by God himself? The Romans banned the Jews from the Holy Land. And even after Moses came down the mountain from getting the 10 Commandments and the instructions on how to build the Ark of the Covenant, he found the Jews had collected all the gold, not all the Jews maybe, and built a golden calf and were having this drunken orgy ritual celebration. Moses was ticked and he smashed the tablets. This is no small thing. He had to go back up to the mountain for 40 days per the Bible to get 2 replacement tablets. So trying to get into the psychology of what the heck, WTH, is no easy thing. So I read these pages and read these pages, and the next book after this, and the next book after this, and then I have something to try to, like adding up a bunch of numbers, and you draw a line and it comes up to a sum total. That's what happens to your brain if you keep on looking into things. You discover things. And eventually you maybe be able to figure it out. But I am aware that men and women throughout human history have tried to figure out what's going on. And they did it in vain. But actually, maybe I must be enjoying being a researcher because I continue on. When I too could be down at the beach, at the tiki bar, having a drunken orgy, forgetting all the rules of family values in society, and do business dealings and conniving to get all I want because of my evil inclinations, if I have them. Or if you have good intentions and inclinations and you want to be some goody two-shoes, you should do that. This is part of the New Age thinking. And getting grounded in that thinking might help me when I continue to go back and watch some of those channeled material by different entities from the other side. I'm going to be listening to what they're saying. I'm going to remember this material. And the Freudian material. And so much more that I've been reading. And the Freudian process of eliminating unruly drives was comparable to the Rabbinic idea of sweetening the evil impulse. The rabbis' idea of sweetening the evil impulse. And I better show you this. You may not believe me, but it says it. Like I said, reading books like this is a challenge. But if you keep going, you do find some alarming sentences. Sweetening the evil impulse. There is also a profound optimism that even the evil impulse can be made to serve a life-affirming purpose. See what I'm saying? So evil impulses and the actions you take, according to even the Theosophical Society, books I've gone over, Helena Blavatsky, The Secret Doctrine, and so many more, the mystery school religion, they think that these evil things that you do are meant to grow your soul. It's part of the learning process. You're not supposed to just learn good stuff. What kind of being or God would that make you? You have to learn the good and the bad. and experience it and do it. So it knows what to feel like when you murder somebody or sexually abuse somebody, according to this new way of thinking that they're trying to promote. Like I said, if you can't beat them, join them. And they're trying to push this hard against society to get people to believe that. Like all those symbols on people's bumpers with all those different religious symbols that say coexist. Or people down on the city park today have demons and dagger tattoos all over their body, and so much more. And I'm no Puritan or saint here, or religious student or philosopher. I'm trying to find out, WTH, what's going on? What the heck? Why are they doing it? Does it have a spiritual component to it? Is it a cosmic battle? There is also a profound optimism that even the evil impulse can be made to serve the life-affirming purpose. For as the rabbis point out, without the driving energies of the emotions within man, no one would marry or beget a child or build a business. Do you hear that? So if we didn't have these evil impulses, the driving energies of the emotions within man, no one would marry, beget a child, or build a business. And this guy who wrote the book, Peace of Mind, interesting title for this kind of thinking, was popular for 50 years. All the varying aspects of man, including his competitiveness and rivalry and passions, can be harnessed to the chariot of goodness. And I am aware that the writings of people who are possessed has a character of its own. And with that said, like even Helena Blavatsky, who was supposedly communicating with masters, beings from the other side, and all those channeled material books I read and made videos on, who were they communicating with? And how interesting, complex, and maybe a superior intellect would the conversation be? Manipulative and deceiving, convincing people to go that way. But anyways, thinking about that for a second, I was reading this book and I remembered this, so I went and looked it up today. When I'm reading this, I'm getting a recognition of it, that the person may not be all there. So what is there up there? The demonic rising number of Italians claim to be possessed request exorcisms. This is current too. I printed this out on 3/20 today, 2018. SputnikNews.com. This press release here. Says here, the Roman Catholic Church is arming its priests to do battle against demonic possession, planning an exorcism workshop in April. This comes after disturbing new figures reveal drastic growth in the number of reported cases of demonic possession. So, can we be made to think things that make it more conducive for a demonic entity to take control of us? Would the people promoting the New Age, New World Order, globalism, using the new technologies, the 5G network, weaponizing microwaves, and the artificial intelligence and the teachings in the school to be more pansexual in thinking and other things, selfish thinking, materialistic instead of spiritual? Would it be more conducive, and the drugs and the alcohol and other craziness going on, and the symbols and the tattoos and the TV programming, would it make it more of a conducive environment for these spiritual entities to possess more people. Look at CERN. Look at all the symbols. Super Bowl halftime, Emmys, Grammys, Olympic openings, Eurovision in Europe, used to the copy of the American Idol program, where in 2014 Conchita Wurst won with the head like Jesus and the body of a woman in a silky dress, singing the song The Phoenix Rising, which has the words in it, "You can't stop us," and so much more. Many of these books that I've gone over help build on the creation of a plausible solution to what's going on. The Vatican has now been forced to pay extra attention to the phenomena, a topic long exploited by the film industry by horror flicks, after it was revealed that 500,000 Italians have to ask for exorcists for help. 500,000 Italians? You know, we got programs like Buffy the Vampire and many others. There's some of the TV programming that I had to turn off. It's such a vicious viewing with the cutting off of arms and impact of bullets and other stuff that's very disturbing. Again, maybe creating a conducive environment for spiritual possession. The forces of evil. The number, which is 3 times as high as it was a few years ago, came up during a recent meeting in Sicily that included testimonies on sex and Satanism. Sex, S-E-C-T-S, that means cults. And Satanism. Talking to Vatican Radio, Friar Benigo Paulina blamed the increase on reported cases on the growing number of people who go to fortune tellers and tarot card readers, which opens the door to the devil and to possession. And I'm saying a lot of the TV programming and thinking, there's more to read than that. You can look it up. I looked it up, FYI, on my search with these words. Request for 200 new exorcists in Italy, and I got 25,700,000 results. So back then, after World War II, think of the mind control even of this picture and the elimination of the cross and Christian symbolism, people believing in Jesus Christ and God, maybe was the protection from possession or joining the evil forces. And it says it right here, or what I just read. There is also a profound optimism that even the evil impulse can be made to serve a life-affirming purpose. For as the rabbi points out, without the driving energies of emotions within man, no one would marry or beget a child or build a business. I completely disagree with that. All the varying aspects of man, including his competitiveness and rivalry and passions, can be harnessed to the chariot of goodness. I started reading that, and it did remind me of other writings by people I suspected of being possessed, like a lot of the material from the Satan books, Aleister Crowley, the Theophist Society, Rosicrucians, high-level Freemasons. You know, we're all supposed to be connected to a silver cord, like a group consciousness as human beings. I suspect there's probably different places to plug that silver cord into. And we all have a choice to be in the heaven God world or in the fallen angel evil world. And I've done a lot of reading on psychic research where they talk to people who have died, and good people claim that their environment is just absolutely wonderful. And they wish they could come back to Earth alive and share it with everybody. The people who were evil and bad described their environment on the other side. I'll have to go over some more of those books, psychic research, which was popular during the 1840s to 1940s, and gigantic volumes of books were written from the Psychic Research Society of Europe and then the Psychic Research Society of America. So this New Age, New World Order globalism has a spiritual mind control component to it. It is my faith that we can subliminate and master the evil within us in the service of righteousness and of life. Lieberman thrilled to the idea that Judaism's insights into human nature matched those of dynamic psychology. Freud, everything is about sex. Sex, sex, sex. Of course, money, money, money. Everybody wants to ignore the poor, the people who are dying in all the Middle East countries that have been destroyed. Nobody wants to ponder that or get angry about that. Mind control has been working. This idea fueled the Jewish polemic in Peace of Mind. The Jewish polemic in Peace of Mind. Polemic. I keep saying it because I had to look it up. Which means aggressive attack in the online computer internet dictionary. And refutation of opinions of another, which was the Jewish polemic of the book Peace of Mind. Aggressive attack. So they are attacking aggressively and putting it into intellectual words, which you have to kind of interpret. A voracious reader, I like that word, voracious. A voracious reader, he was known for reading even while he shaved. So this is the guy we're dealing with. He's reading a book like this. Sex, Freud, while he's shaving too. Joshua Liebman stayed abreast of the philosophical currents of the post-World War, and in Peace of Mind presented arguments about psychology and Judaism that had a clear philosophical goal. Lieberman divided the religious philosophies of his day into two main groups. Those that tried to incorporate the findings of science to produce a richer, humanistic religious life, and those that regarded science as a peripheral or irrelevant to religious life. And those that regarded science as peripheral or irrelevant to religious life. He, of course, identified with the first group. It is basic to my own Jewish tradition that God himself reveals himself anew in every generation, and some of the channels of this revelation in our day are in the healing principles and insights of psychology and psychiatry. Apologize for my reading today. So these new sciences and these Freuds and everything's about sex and destroying Christianity. It's an old, outdated religion. You don't need God. You don't believe in Jesus. The school teaches that Jesus was a part of mythology. The most prominent representatives of the second group, Lieberman believed, were the European existentialist and neo-Orthodox Protestants. He named Karl Barth and Emil Brunner, who had completely lost faith not only in liberalism but in rationalism, and whose attitude is one of basic gloom and pessimism. They conceived of the human being as an unredeemed sinner, condemned by his finiteness to anguish and anxiety, Lieberman set himself against those religious thinkers. So you're not supposed to believe in sin. And he's painting the rest of us as they conceived of the human being as an unredeemed sinner, condemned by his very finiteness to anguish and anxiety. Lieberman set himself against these religious thinkers. Temperamentally and theologically, I am committed, this is Lieberman speaking, to seeing man not as a hopeless sinner, but as a child of God, created in his image. One of the fundamental issues that will be fought out in religious literature in these coming years lies just here. So he's predicting that the fundamental issues that will be discussed in coming years, whether we shall view the human adventure with hope and despair, whether we shall look upon physical and social sciences and other creations of human reason as indispensable allies in the spiritual fulfillment, or whether broken-hearted and filled with guilt, we shall proclaim man's nothingness while waiting for the unmerited grace of God. The unmerited grace of God. I suppose a person could get caught up in these readings and start believing in some kind of theology like this. Like I said, it takes a while to try to get into the mind of these people in this mystery religion, satanic, luciferic, whatever. Spiritual possession on the rise, insane TV programming that's just not even human, that's too disturbing to the mind. Young people supposedly shooting up people in schools and all that. Drugs, people seeing psychiatrists becoming murderers, like the Denver shooting in the movie theater. What's going on? The science of psychology would also enrich religious life. The science of psychology would also enrich religious life by giving people of different faiths a unique opportunity to transcend their dogmatic differences and recognize each other's common human nature. So there's the word dogmatic differences, and then of course I'm reminded of morals and dogma. So there's the word dogma, dogmatic, and the two-headed eagle there, also on the Rothschild shield, also in the King Solomon's temple, also on the Freemasonic lodges. So I know it's stretching it, but you got to search out these little clues and have a good idea in your brain that you have to be careful what you're reading. It seems to me that certain people write things in such an intellectual, seemingly way that it just boggles people's minds and they want to embrace it, going, wow, this guy's really smart. I remember when I was younger, before I began my investigation, much younger, I was standing in line at a deli with some friends, a friend, and I heard one of the customers parroting something I had heard on the news the night before, but parroting it as if it was fact. And I, being a aware person, knew that what they were saying, repeating that they saw on TV, was not true. So it did alarm me. I even wrote a piece for a newspaper in the editorial section telling people they cannot believe what they see on TV. And then run around telling everybody this is true. The Arabs did 911 with box cutters. A lot of people believe that. Not all the other evidence that's clearly there. That tells a completely different story. Back to this book. He says here to transcend their dogmatic differences and recognize each other's common human nature. So dogmatic differences. So they're saying your beliefs in God and Jesus and your religion. It's all dogma, just like the... So when you read this material, you want to try to put some common sense thinking to it. And you look at this picture and the name of the book, Jews and the American Soul. There are no sectarian labels, to our fears and aspirations. What did that say? Liebman argued, there are no sectarian labels to our fears and aspirations. There is no essential difference between the anxieties and the phobias and the hopes and hungers of a Catholic, a Protestant, or a Jew. In the kind of religion he promoted, one that harvested the insights into human behavior that social scientists provided a new definition of spiritual maturity. A new definition of spiritual maturity emerged. Maturity would no longer be defined in the old dogmatic terms. Here we go. The old teachings don't apply anymore, which assigned moral superiority to the believer and who adhered more diligently to the tenets of Protestantism, Catholicism, and Judaism. Other religions had not yet entered into the mainstream American vocabulary. But they seem to be leaving out here Buddhism and Hinduism and shamanism and much more. Zoroastrianism. And again, there seems to be spiritual components like prophets or beings coming from the other side in all these religions. I think there is a connection of the other side, the heaven world, sending teachers to try to steer mankind, on the correct course. But what is this new age, new world order, globalism? Is it steering us on a bad course? Should we, or do we need to, emergency-wise, wake up? This is coming at us like a freight train. This AI, artificial intelligence, with the weaponized electromagnetic microwaves and all those digital software programs that are monitoring everything that you and I do, and has capability to influence us, as they're exclaiming about Russia with Facebook interfering with the American elections, and even over in Europe, they're bad-mouthing Russia. So somebody's trying to increase the tension, which to me is part of the psychology they're using. Maturity would no longer be defined in the old dogmatic terms, which assigned moral superiority to the believer who adhered most diligently to the tenets of Protestantism, Catholicism, or Judaism. Instead, maturity belonged to those who learned to understand themselves deeply, to master their undesirable traits, and to fashion characters of strength and integrity. In other words, people who came to grips with their basic inner conflicts deserved to be called spiritually mature regardless of the religious doctrines they espoused. So I guess you could tell a couple men who were homosexual getting married that they were probably more spiritually mature, regardless of the religious doctrines they espoused. The end times, down will be up will be down, everything will be backwards, good will be called bad, bad will be called good. And yet, despite his zeal for psychology, Lieberman insisted on the ultimate value of religion and of Judaism in particular. The ultimate value of religion and of Judaism in particular. And we know they want to destroy Christianity, and they've been working at that for hundreds of years. In his call for life-affirming religious beliefs that gave people a sense of relatedness to the divine power, without submerging them into a conviction of their sinfulness, Joshua Lieberman saw Judaism as a model for all humanity. Peace of Mind asserted Judaism's place not simply as an equal partner with Christianity, but as a religion of unequal depth in its assessment of human nature. What did I say in the beginning of this video? If you can't beat them, you might have to join them. And according to the Protocols of Zion and many other books, they're supposed to be bringing us this chaos and anarchy and all this mind control propaganda, things that challenge our beliefs as we grow up. So they are slowly changing us to join the dark side, so it seems. So Joshua Lieberman saw Judaism as a model for all humanity. So I read that, and then I thought about this little clip that I saw and recorded a while back. Let me play it.
There are significant political changes on the map from day to day. First it was Tunisia, then Egypt, Libya, now Syria. What do all those changes mean for the Middle East? And all that's happening, is it positive for Israel?
Yes. I mean, there may be a transitional period that will create some difficulties, but in the long run, yes, look. It's not that those countries are changing. All countries are changing because the world has changed. And nobody has a choice, either to go with the modern age or to lag behind and really become poor and irrelevant. What's happening is, governments are no longer controlling their own economy. Instead of a national economy, you have a global economy. Now, if you want to enter, you have to follow the new rules of economy.
Exactly.
There's an old saying, don't believe what people say. Believe what people do. They'll say one thing and they'll do another. So Mr. Joshua Lieberman, who wrote Peace of Mind, the book, in 1946, saw Judaism as a model for all humanity. And I'm remembering that for 2,000 to 3,000 years, there's been something called a diaspora, where the Jews were dispersed from their homeland. The first 100 years, apparently, by God, for the things they did wrong in the Holy Land. The second 100 years, probably God, but initiated by Rome for the troubles they were causing. And then in the next 2,000 years, 100 different plus or minus countries banned, exiled them, century after century. But Judaism as a model for all humanity. Peace of Mind asserted Judaism's place not simply as an equal partner with Christianity, but as a religion of unequal depth in its assessment of human nature. Wow, it's unequal depth of assessment of human nature. So somebody's assuming we're all about sex, sex, sex. Money, money, get everything I can. Selfishness. It's good for you. Let go of your restraining yourself and religious beliefs. Embrace your evil tendencies. Just saying. Lieberman characterized Judaism as an affirmative, indomitable religion of love, and criticized traditional Christianity for burdening the human psyche with excessive and improper guilt. In light of Christianity's traditional claim that it was the religion of love, superseding the legalistic faith of the Jews, Lieberman argued presented a sharp challenge to the status quo. Irrational guilt and Christianity's alleged encouragement of it was Lieberman's primary target in Peace of Mind. He declared that Christianity, shaped by Christ's concept of the immorality of lustful thoughts, and by Pauline, Augustine, Lutheran, and Calvinistic views of sin, promoted a false conscience based on the repression and condemnation of natural impulses. So these evil tendencies people have, it's just a condemnation of natural impulses. I was watching a InfoWars video this morning, and apparently some major city in California, there was some trouble going on. You could smell the drugs and other things going on. And one reporter asked the police, why aren't you arresting these people? Why don't you go in there and stop this? And the policeman said, well, it wouldn't do any good. If we arrested them and stopped them, the court system would just release them. So the people who control our world are trying to embrace this philosophy I'm talking about, this new age, new world order, bringing us chaos and anarchy. So it seems. Because of its doctrine that desire is equivalent to the commission of sin, Christianity advises man to choke down every evil thought, lest he fall into the pit of eternal damnation. Well, I would hope that these kids that are supposedly going in schools shooting at people, I think they should have been taught Christian values and to choke down these evil thoughts. Don't you think? This says here they don't want that. They want people to embrace their evil impulses. In short, Lieberman was arguing that classic Christianity causes neurosis. These are the psychiatrists that are counseling people and administering drugs to people. You just have to wonder, is he intentionally doing this or unwittingly, or is he possessed? This philosophy seems a little bit disturbing. But that's just me. After all, repression and misplaced guilt created many of the psychological and emotional problems that people face. And so throughout the ages, when there was anger or even action taken against the Jews for things they had done, they were blaming it on everybody else. Even if they found dead bodies of young children that had been sacrificed. But Judaism contained an antidote to the illness of self-condemnation. So the Judaism has an antidote to the illness of self-condemnation. So don't feel guilty for anything you did. Join Judaism, and it's probably not all Jewish people, into the Reformed Judaism, which appears to be some kind of Satanism, Luciferianism, mystery religion, Kabbalistic teaching, Theophist Society, Rosicrucian, Mystery School of the Freemasons, and the thousands of other New Age teachings. Some of it may be good, but of course they mix some good with the bad, so people will swallow that pill. Instead of a morbid emphasis on original and intractable sin, so you shouldn't be thinking that homosexuality, even though it says in the Bible it's wrong, you shouldn't be believing that. In a morbid emphasis on original and irretractable sin, Lieberman urged religion ought to give people the faith first enunciated in Genesis and continually stressed in classic Judaism that man is truly created in God's own likeness. Well, that sounds nice. And I do understand that this kind of reading and thinking may be a bit of a challenge, but if you have been paying attention to the world we live in, I mean, even newscasters and many people are saying things are very bizarre, even with things like the Mandela effect, where seemingly things are changing in that we remember. Time is changing. Maybe somebody's altering the timeline. Things like CERN and all these rituals. You just have to take each little bit of information you can and try to understand what's going on. And what I'm clearly seeing is there's been this psychological disagreement throughout the known human history of the material that I've gone over, all these books, between certain peoples and the regular population. In other words, people weren't pleased with people performing witchcraft, or the kings hiring magicians or sorcerers, and prophecy being not what people wanted to hear. And when the Jews 2,000 years ago were praying and expecting a Savior, when the spirit world God sent one, his own son, they rejected the King of Peace and they wanted a king of war. And I don't think that philosophy has changed, but I think the deception and the propaganda is a bombardment on humanity, and people need to read it and be discerning. The critique of Christianity and peace of mind was measured and consistent with what many liberal Protestants believed, though it was uniquely provocative coming from a rabbi. Far from being antagonist towards Christianity, Lieberman dedicated himself to interfaith understanding, through both his preaching and his many lectures to Protestant seminaries and colleges in New England. He praised Christianity for its contribution to civilization, and he cherished the sympathy and collaboration of the American Christian leaders who protested the Jewish condition under Hitler and supported the Zionist idea of Palestine. 1946. Protested the Jewish condition under Hitler and supported the Zionist idea in Palestine. I find it hard to believe that this man wasn't aware that prior to World War II, they wrote a book Series 24 in my series, Germany Must Perish, which called for the death of every man, woman, and child of German descent. The world must be purged of every German prior to World War II. This man here, quite well educated, I suspect knew about that. He was a psychiatrist, and I realized there are a lot of people out there with some strange ways of thinking. American Christianity has given 4.5 million Jews in this country at least a renewed confidence in man, in human nature, and in godliness. He said in a wartime sermon called A Jewish Tribute to American Christianity. And I'm clearly aware that it is the mystery schools, secret societies, Kabbalistic, elitist, utopian Jewish people who are destroying Christianity intentionally. And a lot of Jewish people, God-believing people, who believe that Jesus was real, and some others that are not, have written books trying to warn the rest of us. I've gone over many of those famous people's books and material. Even President John Kennedy said it, that secret societies are repugnant to the American way of life, and that he was going to expose them. And instead of the usual December haringers about the effects of Christmas on Jews, so here he says, instead of the usual December haringers about the effects of Christmas on Jews, Lieberman, in a sermon entitled A Jew Looks at Christmas. So it was the Jews who were accused of having Jesus crucified. So Christmas is supposed to be a pain and a thorn to these people at Christmas time, that we celebrate Christmas and that Jesus was the Messiah, Savior, Son of God. Apparently, a lot of these people in the mystery schools and Zionist Jewish people reject Jesus as the Savior. And something very different. It is Christianity alone that can convert the pagans and heathens of our day. Christianity, which has the organization and the means of preaching the missionary spirit, which may indeed create a world Christian community in which Judaism will have its place as a creative partner, equal, and comrade. He uses the word comrade. Anyways, part of the programming, whether it's the visual symbols or the intellectual writings and thinking, my point again, when you read this stuff, and there's more in this book, about he considered Jewish values essential to the new theology of self-acceptance he was promoting. The man who has lived through the intense psychological experience, psychotherapeutic experience, he explained, based on his own venture into psychoanalysis, has learned many lessons about his own inner nature, but among the most valuable is this: self-understanding rather than self-condemnation is the way to inner peace and mature conscience. So it's plausible arguments that people can try to help promote the idea that Christianity is destructive, causing people to feel guilty about bad things they do. It's part of the New Age teaching. Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.